Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The sound of running water filled the tiled bathroom, a soft mist curling in the air. I stood near the mirror, one leg slightly bent on the edge of the tub, the razor gliding carefully along my skin. The scent of vanilla body wash lingered, warm, faintly sweet. My reflection looked calm, but inside, my heartbeat drummed faster than I wanted to admit. Then the door creaked. I froze. My eyes flicked up to the mirror, and there he was. My stepson, standing in the doorway, caught mid-motion, his hand still on the knob. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. His eyes widened first in surprise, then softened, following the slow, trembling motion of my hand as I set the razor down. "Didn't you knock?" I managed, my voice too soft, too unsure. He swallowed hard, eyes darting away, then back. I didn't think anyone was in here." The silence stretched thin between us, heavy with unspoken awareness. I could feel the warmth rising to my cheeks, not from embarrassment alone, but something else, something that made the air feel thicker. He turned as if to leave, then hesitated. The faint reflection of his gaze in the mirror lingered, curious, hesitant, conflicted. My pulse raced faster. I wanted to say something, anything, but words refused to form. The hum of the light above us filled the space instead, a low, trembling sound that seemed to echo the tension in my chest. Finally, I reached for the towel beside me. My fingers brushed his as he stepped forward to hand it over, and that brief touch, barely a second, sent a spark through my entire body. "Thanks," I whispered. He nodded slowly, his breath catching just slightly before he turned away. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but the moment didn't end there. It stayed, humming in the air, lingering like the warmth of the steam against my skin. I pressed a hand over my heart, feeling its rhythm uneven, fast, alive. Something had just shifted between us. And I wasn't sure if either of us could pretend it hadn't. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. After that moment in the bathroom, everything between us quietly changed, though neither of us said a word about it. Breakfast felt different the next morning. The clinking of spoons, the soft hum of the refrigerator, even the light through the window carried a kind of weight. He sat across the table, pretending to scroll on his phone, but every now and then I caught him looking, just for a second too long. He used to call me by my name, cheerful and easy. Now, it was always just hey. Short. Careful. Measured. And I noticed the same care in how he moved around me, not too close, but never too far. My husband had been gone for work for weeks now. The silence of the house stretched in the evenings, heavy and hollow. Sometimes I'd turn on the TV just to hear another voice, but the quiet always won. That's when I'd hear his footsteps in the hallway, his door opening, the faint rustle of his shirt, the low hum of his voice when he talked to someone on the phone. We were both just there. Living in the same house, trying not to notice the small things that were suddenly impossible not to notice. One evening, the rain started to fall. He is soft at first, then heavier, drumming on the windows. I was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, half watching a movie. He came in, damp from the rain, his hair sticking to his forehead. "Power's out in my room," he said. "Mind if I stay here for a while?" I nodded, heart skipping. "Of course." He sat beside me, leaving just enough space for the air to feel charged. The sound of thunder rolled somewhere far away. When lightning flashed, for a second, his face was bathed in white light, and I could see that same look again, the one from the bathroom. Curious. Careful. Searching. I looked away, pretending to adjust the blanket. But he noticed. I could tell from the way his breath slowed, from the quiet that grew between us, not uncomfortable, just alive. We talked for a while, about his classes, about how my husband was always traveling, about how empty the house felt. It was simple conversation, but beneath every word there was something unspoken. Something neither of us dared to name. When our hands brushed while reaching for the remote, neither of us moved. His fingers lingered for a heartbeat, long enough for mine to feel the warmth of his skin. Then I pulled back, quietly, pretending nothing happened. But my chest ached with the effort of keeping still. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, relentless, like the pulse of something we both tried not to feel. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Days passed, but that night lingered between us like an echo neither of us could silence. Every glance, every word, carried a new kind of weight. He started finding reasons to be around, fixing a cabinet, helping with groceries, asking questions he already knew the answers to. And I let him. One afternoon, I caught him talking on the phone in the kitchen, his voice low, playful. A girl's laughter crackled faintly through the speaker. My stomach tightened unexpectedly, a feeling that shouldn't have been there. I looked away quickly, pretending to focus on washing the dishes, but my heartbeat betrayed me. When he noticed me, he smiled, that same boyish grin, teasing yet uncertain. "Jealous," he said lightly. I turned, trying to mask the heat rising to my face. "Why would I be?" He shrugged, moving closer, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of rain still clinging to his shirt. "You tell me." Our eyes met, and for a long second, neither of us moved. The sound of dripping water from the faucet filled the silence, each drop marking the space between us. I should have stepped back. I didn't. His gaze flicked to my lips, his brief, but enough to send a rush of warmth through my chest. Then he cleared his throat and turned away, grabbing a towel to dry the counter, pretending that moment hadn't just happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it, the nearness, the quiet challenge in his tone, the way he'd looked at me as if I was someone else entirely. Someone he couldn't, but wanted to, understand. The next morning, he avoided my eyes. But later, when our paths crossed in the hallway, our shoulders brushed. Just that, a brush, but it felt electric, like the world had paused for us alone. There was no denying it anymore. Something was building between us, something fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It was late again. The house was quiet except for the soft hiss of the rain outside. My husband had called earlier, another delay, another night away. I told him I understood, but after the call ended, I just stood there, staring at the empty side of the bed. A faint knock came at the door. "Can't sleep?" his voice asked from the hallway. I hesitated, then opened the door halfway. He stood there in a gray t-shirt, hair slightly tousled, eyes half tired, half something else. "Neither can I admitted softly. He smiled faintly. "Want some tea?" I made enough for two. In the kitchen, the lights were low, golden, wrapping everything in quiet warmth. Steam curled from 2 mugs. We sat at the counter, close enough that I could feel the heat from his arm beside mine. We talked about nothing: music, rain, his plans, the past, but every word carried a heartbeat underneath. Then, as I turned to put my cup away, I almost slipped on the wet tile. He caught me instinctively, one hand around my waist, the other gripping my arm. The world froze. My breath caught as I looked up, my hands resting on his chest for balance. His heart was pounding, fast, strong, matching mine. Our faces were inches apart, eyes locked. Neither of us spoke, afraid to break the fragile spell hanging between us. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice low. I nodded, but I didn't move. Neither did he. The air around us felt heavy, pulsing with everything we weren't supposed to feel. For one long, impossible second, it felt like the space between us didn't exist anymore. The thunder outside rolled deep and distant, like the world was holding its breath. Then, a sound upstairs. A door creaking open. We pulled apart instantly, both breathing hard, both pretending nothing had happened. But it had. Our eyes met once more, wordless, charged, before he stepped back into the shadowed hallway, his hand brushing the frame as if he wanted to stay but couldn't. I stood frozen, pulse racing, knowing that after tonight, there would be no going back. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The morning after that night felt strange, too still, too quiet. The rain had finally stopped, but its memory clung to the walls, heavy and damp. I could still feel the echo of his hands around my waist, the warmth that had stayed long after he stepped away. I told myself to forget it, that it was nothing, but every time I saw him, I knew that was a lie. That afternoon, while I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard voices outside. My husband's car had pulled into the driveway, unexpected. He was home early. My heart stuttered. He came in smiling, suitcase in hand. "Surprise," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt distant. Behind him, my stepson appeared from the hallway, freezing when he saw his father. Their eyes met, just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. It was subtle, but I felt it instantly: tension. Unease. "What's going on?" my husband asked, his tone light but searching. "Nothing," I said quickly, too quickly. "Just, how's things? You know." He smiled again, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. "How's things?" "Right." That night, the air in the house felt colder. My husband was quiet through dinner, his gaze shifting between the two of us. My stepson barely said a word, staring down at his plate. I tried to keep my hands steady, but my nerves betrayed me. A glass slipped from my grip, shattering on the floor. "I'll clean it," my stepson said, jumping up. I said I'll do it, my husband cut in, his voice firmer than usual. The room went still. The storm wasn't outside anymore, it was here, between us. When he left the kitchen, my stepson turned to me, his eyes filled with guilt and something else, fear. "He knows," he whispered. The words hit me like cold water. "Knows what?" He shook his head. "That something's changed. That I feel," he stopped himself, swallowing hard. "That I care too much." Before I could answer, my husband's voice came from the doorway, quiet, heavy, edged with pain. "Care too much about what, exactly?" I froze. He stood there, expression unreadable, eyes flicking between us. The silence was unbearable. My stepson looked down, jaw tight. "Nothing. It's nothing." But it wasn't. The truth hung in the air, unsaid, undeniable. My husband's gaze lingered on me for a long, breaking moment before he turned and walked away without another word. The sound of the door closing felt final. My stepson looked at me, face pale, eyes full of regret. And for the first time, I realized, no matter what happened next, nothing in this house would ever be the same again. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The silence that followed that night was unbearable. The house, once filled with quiet warmth, now felt like a battlefield, every word sharp, every breath heavy. My husband barely looked at me. My stepson stayed locked in his room, the sound of his footsteps disappearing whenever I entered a hallway. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I found my husband sitting in the living room, the TV playing but the volume muted. His expression was unreadable, tired, distant, wounded. "Can we talk?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer at first, just stared at the screen. Talk about what? You know what, I whispered. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes cold but sad. I don't know what's worse, that you let him get close, or that you didn't stop him sooner. Tears stung my eyes. It wasn't what you think, I said, voice trembling. Nothing happened. But yes, something changed. I lost control of boundaries I should have kept. He exhaled shakily, rubbing his temples. Do you love him? The question hit like a blade. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream no. But silence answered for me. He stood up, defeated. I thought we were just tired, not broken. As he left the room, I sank to the couch, the weight of my choices crashing over me. Every stolen glance, every heartbeat I ignored, it had all led here. Later that evening, the door creaked open. My stepson stood there, his face pale and eyes red. I'm sorry, he said. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't mean to make things worse. His voice cracked, and in that moment, he looked less like the confident man who teased me and more like a boy caught in a storm he didn't understand. I walked toward him, my voice soft but firm. It's not just your fault. We both let this happen. He looked down, guilt shadowing his features. I think I should leave for a while. I nodded, my throat tight. Maybe that's best. When he reached for his bag, our hands brushed one last time. No words were needed. The warmth of that touch said everything: apology, regret, and something bittersweet that couldn't survive reality. As the door closed behind him, the air seemed to shift, painful, yes, but clean. A wound starting to heal. I sat by the window as dusk fell, the sky painted in soft gold and gray. I didn't know what would happen next, with my husband, with myself, but I knew this: some feelings never truly disappear. They simply change form, becoming lessons, scars, or memories that never fade. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Weeks passed since that storm inside our home. The air slowly cleared, like a long, painful rain finally giving way to morning light. My husband and I barely spoke at first, both of us caught between what was broken and what could still be saved. But time has a strange way of softening even the sharpest edges. One evening, as I sat outside watching the sunset, he joined me without a word. The orange light spilled across his face, tired, thoughtful, but not angry anymore. I don't want us to stay like this forever, he said finally. His voice cracked, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen in a long time: honesty. Neither do I whispered. He nodded slowly, looking at the horizon. We both made mistakes. Maybe distance made us strangers. But if you're willing to start again, so am I. Something in my chest loosened. It wasn't forgiveness in an instant, it was the first step toward it. I reached for his hand, and for the first time in months, he didn't pull away. That night, we talked for hours, not about guilt or blame, but about everything we'd forgotten: the laughter, the dreams, the love that once built our world. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A week later, my stepson came by to gather the last of his things before moving into his own apartment. There was no bitterness in his eyes, only quiet acceptance. I'm glad you two are okay, he said softly. I needed to grow up a little too. I smiled, tears forming but not from pain. We all did. When he left, I watched him drive away under the golden evening light. It felt like a chapter closing, not with loss, but with peace. Later that night, as rain began to fall again, my husband pulled me close on the couch. We sat in silence, the sound of raindrops washing over us like forgiveness. His fingers brushed my cheek gently. I missed this, he murmured. So did I. For the first time in a long while, our hearts beat in sync, not with guilt or longing, but with hope. The storm that once tore us apart had, somehow, cleared the way for something new. Sometimes, love doesn't return the way it left, it comes back quieter, wiser, stronger. And as the night deepened, we simply held each other, two souls finally finding their way home.